The US empire is on its last strides. With such excessive debt that the average American carries, they have no way to pay it back. Comparing wages to debt is really striking when you consider how long it will take for most people to pay it all back, if ever. Eventually, the creditors start asking for their money. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to look at the American debt fiasco. But if you are in Canada like myself, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, anywhere across the world, I'm sure this applies to you and your fellow neighbors. Let's begin by taking a look at this. What are Americans spending their additional income and debt on? And so they have said that we have seen a rise in incomes over these years. So we'll cover that more in a moment. But I wanted to begin with this, 1972 versus today. What we can tell is that there's no doubt shelter represents a larger percentage of our income today than it did back in the 70s. We have seen a definite rise in the price that we pay for houses, for rent, and this is increasing far faster than our wages are. Same with healthcare, pensions and insurance. Entertainment apparently has gotten cheaper, and something that was interesting is food. Now, I do believe the food in general could be because of the very, very low quality foods that we are seeing today. So I wouldn't necessarily consider the price drop here to be a good thing. If you're paying for good food at the store, in the produce department, I can tell you right now from experience, from a person who eats basically 80%, 90% of the produce aisle, that it has been increasing. It's been something to see, to track the progress on these particular items, whether that is, potatoes or carrots or anything else. You can see that as the years go on, as things come in season, they are oftentimes more than they were last year. They suggest to us that the price has increased by 1.8% year over year. I don't know where you live, but where I do, it's not 1.8%. It's a lot higher. Okay? So that's my experience. Anyway, I want to know yours, of course, if you let me know in the comments. Household debt. Total U.S. debt now tops the $13 trillion mark, while mortgage debt is still close to 2008 levels. Student debt skyrocketed 126% since the last peak in the credit cycle. You're seeing this here, something that I've shown you before, but just a different way to look at it all. I thought it was interesting, wanted to bring it to you, where we have seen all of these different types of debt have been increasing in one way, shape, or form. And for example, I've seen credit cards, how they said they've been paying off their credit cards more than ever before. However, they have been using their homes as an ATM, and that has been a proven fact. And that is not a way to be paying off your credit card. I do actually agree. If you are in this predicament, let's say if I was in this predicament, I would want to use my house equity to pay off my credit cards. But what happens here is they just rack up more debt on their credit card. So that's not a good thing. But if it was just a one-time thing, I would do that because I wouldn't want to be paying that high rate of interest on my credit card. I would rather take the lower interest rate on my mortgage. But we shouldn't get the debt in the first place, all right? How American household finances are changing. Visualizing shifts in income, savings, debt, and household spending. So you'll see this right here. In the last 20 years, U.S. household income is apparently up 9.1%. I definitely don't agree with that, but hey, let's take it for what it is. 54,000 versus 59,000. Now, you as the average individual back in the 90s till today, think about what you were paying for your groceries. Has your grocery bill gone up in relation to that? Well, I would have to say it has to be a lot more. A lot more. Let's just, if we take off 10 from these, let's say it's $5,400. Let's say over the course of the year, you were paying $5,400 for your groceries in that given year. Were you now paying $5,900? I don't think so. I think it's a lot more than that. It seems like everything has really, really increased. Take it for, anything. For example, if you've been going to the same restaurant for a little while in a major city, okay, not in the small cities. If you're living in a major city and you go to a particular restaurant, okay, so let's say you're ordering this particular pasta dish, you go there every single week or even every 3 months, let's say, and you return there. And so you return there. You were paying $15. You return there a few months later. It's $15.50. Return there maybe 6 months later. It's $16. $16.5, $17, $17.5. And then every time you go, it's increasing. The ingredients are still the same. Basically, you've been getting the same thing. You've been ordering it there, same thing. And the place hasn't been renovated. There haven't been any changes. What's happening here? Well, it is in one way, yes, it could be corporate profits. So the business might increase their costs onto the customer, make more profit. But at the same time, we've been seeing the ingredients going into these foods costing more. The margin in between the two, hey, that's a different story. Okay, at the bottom, debt to annual income ratio has reached the highest point in modern history, something that I have talked about very often on this channel. Yes, you can earn a good wage. You can earn more than you were 20 years ago. But how much debt are you in at this time? How many mortgages do you have? What about your credit card debt, student loans, line of credit, so on? And of course, the personal savings rate continues to decline. And why would anybody save these days? I almost don't blame people. When you look at the average interest rate on any sort of so-called guaranteed investment, they're very low, extremely low historically. And then I wanted to touch on this. America's $18 trillion economy, that's back in 2015, divided in half. So although the number might be a little outdated, it shows us where the wealth is concentrated. And you see, look around the US, all of the major cities seem to be where all the wealth is, where all the business goes, but not necessarily where all the people live either. But you do see these being big population centers, whether we're looking at, whether it's like, let's say LA, New York, for example. So that's where a lot of the money is, happens to be the population. Also, the assets in these areas are very, very expensive, like real estate. That's something to note. It's not 100%, but here it is, just showing you that. I'm going to show you this in some different ways. It's pretty interesting. And it basically splits the GDP in half in this case. So the darker color and the lighter color, basically just trying to show you how it looks like when 50% of the GDP of the United States is just little tiny pieces of the whole pie. U.S. state borders redrawn and renamed for countries with similar GDPs, again, back in 2015. So you'll see that an entire country, multiple countries, fitting into the U.S., which is a gigantic economy, obviously. And you'll see that here. So all of these states, for example, making up the UK, and so on. I just thought it was an interesting chart. These are all, by the way, out of Visual Capitalist, and they're always showing some really good charts on their infographics and things like this. Top 20 U.S. metro areas by economic activity, renamed for countries with similar GDPs. Look at this. You could see going down South Florida, South Africa. Same sort of GDP numbers here. Looking at what Canada can be, attributed to here. There's another one that I want to show you as well. U.S. states renamed for countries with similar GDPs 2017. Okay, you look at this. UK is California. Then Texas is Canada, Indonesia, and Florida. So it gives you an idea of how big a state is and how big that country is. Just something I thought I would note. And then you can see it as a chart form here. U.S. state, California, the country it compares to, United Kingdom, and so on. Again, I'll move on. Don't want to waste your time. America, an economic snapshot of every U.S. state. Now, this is something that you should definitely check out. I'm not going to be able to, go through it all. This is from Visual Capitalist again, and I'll have the source in the description. Just click on the source link. It brings you over. You can see it for yourself. However, I'll just quickly go through. On the left-hand side, you will see the highest-ranked states. Washington coming in at number 1. Economic activity is really the driving force here. You're looking at the population, 7.4, GDP, 506 billion, median income, 67,000. Industries, information technology, and online retail. There's also manufacturing there. But you can see where the money is moving. It's moving into the tech sector. You can see that also in equities right now. That's very clear. And so we can scroll down briefly just for a second here, looking at California as another example. Home to Silicon Valley. It generates immense wealth and robust job growth. So again, tech sector, moving in on the definitely here on the West Coast. There's no doubt about that. The GDP, $2.75 trillion. Median income, another $67,000, and so on, showing us information technology as well as agriculture is very important for there. And then we'll scroll to the very last one, number 51, West Virginia. Median income, $43,000, GDP, $78 billion. So there's a definite difference in between one state to another. It makes a big difference where you live, how much you're going to be paying for your house, how much you pay for electricity, how much you pay for food, what you're earning on average, what your taxes are like, what you're going to be, many factors, okay? So I wanted to basically just bring this to you to think about for your future, where you're living now, if you're working, if you're unemployed, where you're going to be able to, have a future. I think that this is important for a lot of people who are on fixed incomes like pensions or, Social Security or anything. What does it mean to you? Dollars are not dollars. I've established that here in this video, that over time, dollars lose their value. That is very clear to me. So if you live in a place, you can have the same size square footage house, you can live out of a different state, out of a different city. Suddenly, you have a much better life, even though technically all of the things in your life could be the same. You could live in another city. Maybe it's not necessarily as big. You could have that, 3,000 square foot home. You could be having 2 cars in the driveway. You could have schools nearby, hospital, police, everything else, all nearby you, all the facilities, all of the things that you want. You live in one place, live in a different place, and suddenly it makes a huge difference. That's one of the messages of this video today. Thank you for listening to me rant and rave on. I just wanted to touch on this before we finish off. Now, one of those who has definitely seen a lot of money flying his way, bailouts like in Wells Fargo, for example, and sweetheart deals, preferred pricing, Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway. This on the right-hand side is a graphic showing you the companies that they actually own outright, okay? Whether we're looking at Geico, whether it is, some other companies. So Fruit of the Loom is a recognizable brand here. And so it goes on to show you how many employees they have and so on. If I scroll down here, you can see their investments, something that I've covered here quite a few times here on the channel. They own, I think this number is outdated, but $28 billion of Apple stock. I'm pretty sure they bought a lot more than that. Wells Fargo, they have a huge stake in that company. And of course, when they get a nice bailout, Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett definitely benefits from that. Kraft Heinz, huge company, Bank of America, they bought $5 billion worth of that stock for a cheaper deal than you and I could get. Excellent. That's wonderful. Cash position in Berkshire Hathaway in the bottom left area there. You can see how that has increased. This is a really good chart. If you want to know anything about Berkshire Hathaway in a nice infographic, easy to look at way, this is definitely something you want to check out. I think it's interesting to see this company here. I don't necessarily, though, think that people should be investing based on what they've seen Warren Buffett do. Okay, you could take the ideology, the principles. I definitely agree with that. You're not supposed to be day trading, okay? You're looking for sound investments. You're looking for something that's stable. That's how it should be done. Absolutely. I get the Warren Buffett method. However, he doesn't get the same deals you and I do, and that needs to be factored in. Okay, very important, very important. I just think that a lot of the wealth is concentrated not just into the major cities, not just into, different classes or anything like this. It is focused into just a few hands. That's the way this really works. There are a few corporations out there controlled by a few people, and they decide what goes on in the particular country that you are in, as well as overseas. Very important stuff here. I hope that I've come full circle and really explained why I'm, ranted and raved on, but eventually concluded. Thank you for listening to the rantings of a crazy man. Now, that's all for this video. I just want to ask you, if you found it informative, please give me a thumbs up. Now, if you want the financial education that was not taught in schools, these books right here that I have written are, in my opinion, my extremely biased opinion, these two are the best. Because they break it down so simply that anybody, if you've never read anything about finance before, you can read it, you can understand it, you can learn it. The first book is $20. The second book is $10. And $30 gets you more education than anybody, any average person, has ever learned in their entire lives. I have had people in the financial industry from, all sorts of people who own their own financial companies, all the way down to financial managers and so on. They've read my book and they have said, my colleagues or people in the financial industry, depending on the instance, they could really learn a lot from this book. That was the first book, and if so on in the second book. They are not really continuations of each other. They sort of fill in the blanks of each other. So I do recommend both. However, all I'm trying to say is that 2 books here, imagine how much do you spend on a college education on average, and you don't learn a single thing. Think about how much you spent all the way from kindergarten to grade 12, then through onto post-secondary college or university or whatever. How much money is spent on you? If you could somehow calculate that, right? Let's just make up a number. Let's say $50,000. $30 of that isn't even included in it. That's why I think my books are great. But again, I'm biased. If you want to check them out, links are in the description below. Take care.